Welcome to Wawasan Wire. Today we're talking about Datuk Seri Mohammed Azmin Ali's extremely strong rejection of the recently signed agreement on reciprocal trade between Malaysia and the United States. And this is really significant news. I mean, just yesterday, this major trade deal gets finalized. And almost immediately, the reaction from the opposition, well, it was intense. Datuk Seri Mohammed Azmin Ali, Secretary General of Perikatan Nasional, called it a national surrender. Now, that's a very, very strong word, wouldn't you say? Especially when the government's pitching this as a win for investment.
Oh, absolutely. Surrender. That's language designed to grab attention, and it shifts the whole debate, doesn't it? It moves away from just short-term financial benefits. What's really striking is that the critique from Azmin Ali and Perikatan Nasional isn't about, say, slightly lower tariffs this year. It's aimed squarely at long-term economic sovereignty. The claim is, while it's called reciprocal trade, it's fundamentally unbalanced. It favors the U.S., they argue, and severely limits Malaysia's own ability to direct its economy down the line.
Okay, right. So let's unpack that because that's a huge accusation. We need to get past the headlines and really understand what Perikatan Nasional is pointing to. What are the core parts of their argument suggesting that this RT deal actually compromises Malaysian control? Let's start with that central claim then, that Malaysia has somehow given away control over its economy. You hear this phrase, policy space being shrunk. What does that actually mean? What specific things in the agreement are they saying caused this loss of control for Putrajaya?
Well, the core argument is that the agreement on reciprocal trade puts Malaysia in a, let's say, difficult position. It limits our ability to make our own decisions, self-determination, essentially. It apparently requires us to follow U.S. rules on trade, investment, and, crucially, domestic regulations. So the space for our own policymaking, our economy, gets squeezed quite dramatically. We have to adopt the playbook of a much larger dominant economy.
Okay, that sounds a bit theoretical. Can you give us a more concrete example? How would this actually affect, say, a Malaysian business or maybe a government plan?
Sure. Think about how Malaysia tries to build up certain industries. Maybe it's advanced electronics, maybe it's making our palm oil sector more sustainable. Usually the government uses tools like targeted help, subsidies, or rules that favor local companies, right? Azmin Ali's side argues the RT restricts or even bans these kinds of tools. It forces us to play by U.S. rules, which, ironically, are rules that might prevent the very kind of industrial development the U.S. itself used historically. And it might not just be industry. Think about managing our finances. If the deal puts tight controls on capital moving in and out, well, that could limit Bank Negara Malaysia's options for managing the ringgit, especially if global markets get choppy. Yeah, that flexibility is pretty vital for an economy like ours.
Right, and this is where it gets interesting for anyone listening. We hear reciprocal, and we think fair exchange, equal partnership. But if one side, the much stronger economy, sets the rules for things like subsidies, environmental standards, labor laws,
Right.
then you have to ask, is it really a partnership? Or is it more like an imposition? The argument from the opposition seems to be leaning heavily towards the latter.
It definitely points towards a structural imbalance. And that leads us directly to what Perikatan Nasional is calling perhaps the most damaging clause in the whole agreement. Article 5.1.
Article 5.1. Okay, this one has generated a lot of heat back here. What does this article actually say, and why are they calling it a geopolitical leash?
Article 5.1, according to the critique, is pretty stark. It apparently requires Malaysia to automatically copy any trade restrictions or sanctions the U.S. imposes on other countries. The argument is this completely shreds Malaysia's long-held foreign policy principle, being non-aligned, being neutral.
Whoa, okay, let's be clear on this. So if Washington decides tomorrow to sanction, say, a major trading partner, and let's be honest, China is our biggest, but there are others too, Malaysia would have no choice but to do the same. Even if it devastates our own economy, our ports, our factories, jobs right here, say in places like Johor Bahru or Penang, that sounds less like partnership and more like being forced to pick sides in someone else's fight.
That's precisely the concern being raised. For decades, Malaysia's strength, particularly in the ASEAN region, has been its neutrality, its reliability as a trading partner for everyone. Investors from East and West count on that stability. Signing something like Article 5.1, the argument goes, just throws that credibility away. We suddenly become tied to policy decisions made thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C., and the potential cost of upsetting major trading partners. Well, it could easily outweigh any potential short-term benefits from this agreement. It's a massive strategic shift they're warning about.
Which really brings up a critical question for the government, doesn't it? The opposition is laying out these very serious risks. So what's the counter-argument? What specific benefits, what market access is so valuable that it justifies potentially sacrificing decades of neutrality? The risk-reward calculation, as presented by the critics, seems really unbalanced against our long-term interests.
It's a profound question, yes. Is giving up that foreign policy autonomy worth whatever the projected gains are? And the criticism doesn't stop at geopolitics. They argue this loss of control goes deeper into how we regulate our own markets, even aspects of our national identity.
Okay, let's pivot to that third area then, this idea of handing over regulatory and digital sovereignty. Can you break that down? What are the practical impacts they're highlighting for everyday Malaysians, for businesses here?
Well, there are a couple of layers. First, think about our own national regulators. Azmin Ali says forces Malaysian agencies to simply accept American standards for really key things, stuff like food safety, medicines, even vehicles. So our own bodies, like the Ministry of Health or Safety agencies, might have to approve U.S. products based on U.S. rules, potentially sidestepping the local checks and balances we have in place. It's seen as undermining our ability to protect our own consumers.
And then there's the halal issue you mentioned. Malaysia's a world leader in this. It's a huge part of our brand.
Our national halal certification is seen globally as the benchmark, the gold standard. That gives us huge economic influence in a massive global market. The critique is that this agreement weakens that position. It forces us to recognize various foreign certifiers, potentially with lower or inconsistent standards. This isn't just symbolic. It could dilute the value and trust in the Halal Malaysia brand internationally, basically handing over control of something we currently excel at.
And then the digital economy. I mean, this is massive for Malaysia's future, isn't it? Becoming a high-income nation really depends on getting this right.
Absolutely critical. And the opposition claims the IRD blocks Malaysia from using two vital tools needed to manage our digital future, especially concerning those big global tech firms. First, they say we lose the ability to properly tax these huge tech companies based on the actual money they make in Malaysia. Right now, many operate here extensively but might book profits elsewhere, meaning lost revenue for our government. The IRD supposedly stops us from fixing that.
Okay, that's significant potential revenue. And the second digital protection, they say, we lose.
That's data localization. This is the requirement that companies store important data about Malaysian users within Malaysia. If the RT forbids this, as claimed, then control over our citizens' data, maybe even government data, effectively moves offshore, subject to foreign laws. That's a major security and privacy red flag, isn't it? It's essentially ceding control of our fastest-growing sector.
So if we tie all these threads together, the loss of policy space for development, the Article 5.1 neutrality issue, the handover of regulatory control, especially halal, and this digital sovereignty concern. How does this square with the government calling it a reciprocal deal?
Well, according to the analysis from Perikatan Nasional, it doesn't square well at all. Their conclusion is that whatever immediate trade benefits might appear on paper, they are dwarfed by the long-term structural damage to our sovereignty, our independence, our unique position in Asia. Dr. Seri Mohammed Azmin Ali's message is unambiguous. This RT, as they interpret it, doesn't strengthen Malaysia. It locks us into a future where we have less control economically and geopolitically, all for what they see as an unbalanced relationship with the U.S.
The ball is definitely in the government's court now, isn't it? They need to respond very clearly, point by point, to these structural criticisms, especially on Article 5.1 and what it means for neutrality. It really forces everyone, not just in Putrajaya, to think hard. What is the real price, not just in ringgit, of this reciprocal relationship, if it means potentially signing away control over our own foreign policy decisions?
Looking at the bigger picture, the opposition is basically framing this as Malaysia potentially trading away its independence for perhaps marginal economic gains. It raises that fundamental question. Does this deal risk turning Malaysia from an independent player into more of a strategic dependency?
It leaves you with a heavy thought, doesn't it? How much is that independence actually worth? The power to make our own laws, protect our industries, trade freely. What's the price tag on that in ringgit? It could be one of the most consequential policy decisions we've seen in years. Remember to like and subscribe for more videos like this.